listening to Overwatch League Daily, your daily source for Overwatch League news, scores, and more. Here's your host, KickedTripod.
Good morning, Overwatch League fans. This is your Overwatch League daily episode for January 20th, 2018. Today I'm joined by ZP to discuss yesterday's matches, but first, let's take a look at the scoreboard. Yesterday featured a few lopsided matches. Despite a strong showing from Boston, the Dynasty were still able to shut them down 4-0. For the next match, we saw the battle for the bottom as neither of the Shanghai Dragons or the Florida Mayhem have yet to take more than a map through their first 3 matches. In this match, Shanghai failed to complete a single map, let alone win one, and the Florida Mayhem have something to swagger on stage about. Florida wins this one 4-0. For the final match of the evening, we got to see the winless and demoralized Dallas Fuel take on the undefeated London Spitfire. The Fuel utilized their envious core in this match with Taimu back in and Harry Hook back on support. We did see Siegel come in for Makey at points, but no huge surprises from the Fuel's lineup today. In a refreshing change of pace, the Fuel showed a spark of their former selves, making each map very close, minus a full hold on Horizon Lunar Colony, and even taking a decisive win on Oasis. Despite the strong effort, Prophet and the Spitfire would prove to be too much here, winning the series 3-1. In other news, the Overwatch League front office issued a 4-match suspension and a $2,000 fine to Dallas Fuel tank XQC for violating the Overwatch League Code of Conduct during his individual stream on Thursday. The Dallas Fuel upped the suspension to the rest of Stage 1 an additional 3 matches and have committed to offer XQC additional resources, focus coaching, and physical training and support to XQC during his suspension. So ZP, let's go ahead and start off with the Seoul Dynasty versus the Boston Uprising. I don't think anyone expected this one to be especially close, but I think that Boston's efforts were at least admirable, wouldn't you say?
Oh, absolutely. Boston has been surprising the entire season and sort of been one of the dark horse stories. And I think what I was looking for there is how would they be handling game decisions? And realistically speaking, both their in-game decisions and their tank play was quite good throughout most of the series. They were able to compete with Seoul Dynasty on a more even level than was expected. Even though Seoul came out on top, what we saw from players like Gamsu and Kalios was very promising, both in how they handled engages, how they disengaged, and how they were able to keep things close in that end. Also, ult economy, for sure, where, generally speaking, you watch a game and you go, this team really isn't handling their ults well. There's miscommunications. They're not doing things right. They're not being aware of what the other team has. And you didn't quite see that in this case, where I think to the end of Horizon, which really stood out to me, where you saw both Seoul and Boston being very patient with their ults, where both teams had 6 ults up for quite a long period of time. And that's because Boston knew that Seoul knew that Boston knew. And you saw the sort of mini game of chess that was going on. And I think if you're a Boston fan, it does speak to the idea that their tenets of trying to focus more on coaching and doing the fundamentals right are bearing some fruit.
Something that at least feels like to me when I'm watching Boston is they just seem to lack some strategic depth. The strategies they are executing, like you said, are really fundamentally sound. These are obviously skilled individual players, but they've also been very clear how coachable they are into working as a team. But we kind of saw the same thing over and over.
Right. I mean, well, both teams were running mirror matchups quite a bit in regards to, running the 2-2-2 with Winston Diva, Mercy Zen, double flanker at each other over and over again. But I would say for Boston is that they have more errors that occur just that shouldn't necessarily happen, but there are points where they're not perfect, right? Like I think to the end of Nambani where you could write a headline, dazed and confused Genji wanders around the streets, wonders what to do with the sword with how Dreamcasper was at the end. So, this is a team that certainly isn't doing everything well right now, for sure. But the fact that the fundamentals of gameplay that they've had have been promising is more than can be said for many other teams in OWL right now.
I think it can't be understated either at just how smart of a team Seoul is right now. They just seem to be operating at such a high level of intelligence in Overwatch League. Do you feel like that is probably one of the biggest advantages that they have, at least versus these other top tier teams like even London and NYXL?
Well, undoubtedly, right? And this is one of the more simple things, and yet teams don't do it as well as they should, is that look at what happened on Oasis University, where Seoul is in firm control, 80% to 0, and they have plenty of ults up. Most teams in that situation, when Boston came in and landed a Grav, would fight that back. They would use Transcendence and Grav. They would go all the way in and try and finish it 100 to 0. Seoul, all they invested into that was the initial self-destruct, and they go, actually, we don't have to fight this. Boston, please use everything you have here, and then we're just going to come back in and use what we have on the next fight, and we're going to take this map with ease. And there's instances of that throughout the series where Seoul is always aware of where the other team is in regards to ult charge. They're generally well aware of their victory conditions, and sometimes that means that they'll lose a fight realizing that it doesn't matter that they lose the fight. And you think about, too, in tank gameplay, we mentioned how Boston was impressive with how Gamsu and Kalius were playing, but Seoul sort of uses their tanks as a lifeline, where if Miro goes in and Miro gets heavily damaged, he not only is he going to retreat, but the rest of Seoul is going to disengage as well. They don't stick in losing fights. They don't go, oh, okay, our tank's going to fall, everyone else just dive in. They're very smart about what they need to do to control the fight, and that includes just, playing with their tanks in a way that makes sense. So they don't get caught in situations where they're down one player early and then they still fight back and end up losing horribly. They manage to reset lost fights into won fights.
So I want to ask you, we're going to only ask one question about the Mayhem Shanghai Dragons game, because it was not exactly the most stellar display of top tier competitive Overwatch that we've seen in the past few weeks. But we did see the Mayhem win pretty handily 4-0 here. Are the Mayhem on the upswing here? Is this at least something good for them?
I think it is something good for them. I would say that if for nothing else, it's addition by subtraction, in the sense that it would have been really, really bad for them if they lost to the Dragons. I think that there would have been immense amounts of pressure on them if they lost map number 1 and they sort of realized, this is bad, because clearly the Dragons have not been impressive so far, and they've developed their reputation of, well, I guess everyone's going to beat the Dragons. You don't want to be the first team to lose to the Dragons. That's where things are at right now. And look, they came out on top in the McDonald's Invitational. What more can you say? I will say, though, that they did gamble a little bit. They came in very stylish, Gangnam Style on the way in. If they somehow ended up losing the series, well, it would have been a walk of shame on the way out. But look, I think this series definitely still says more about Shanghai than Mayhem, where Shanghai just looks lost at every facet of competitive Overwatch. Every good thing you could say about a team, from mechanical play to good coordination between tanks and DPS, between ult economy. Shanghai is screwing up everything. Just every aspect of the game right now is not working well for Shanghai, and everything from just like player swaps that don't make any sense. I don't know. Shanghai needs a lifeline. They need mid-season signings to help them. But for the Mayhem, it was a good day. They did not lose to the Dragons.
Okay, I lied to you. 2 questions.
Right.
Maybe you might not actually know here, but do you know why they took Dia off of the Widowmaker McCree role and stuck him on Tracer when in the preseason they had Undead on Tracer?
The only thing I can think of there, and this is what goes with these swaps, where someone is incredibly good at a hero and you go, why would you move him from that? It's because you think that the benefit you would get from him playing a different hero would be an upgrade or it would be a bigger overall upgrade by swapping the roles, even if the player involved is the best at both. Obviously, Dia is very good in the Widow McCree role. I don't necessarily think it's a good idea to swap him off of it. but that would probably be the underlying logic, right? Is that they would still be a net positive by swapping him because the gain on Tracer, a key role, would be bigger than the loss it would have from him swapping.
Fair enough. Okay. So I'm at least not crazy. Okay, good.
I think at this point, they're sort of, it can't get any worse. Let's try to change things up. That seems to be the mode that they're in.
Sure. So let's talk about the Dallas Fuel versus the London Spitfire. The Fuel have been in a slump, to say the least, going from one of the favorite NA-based teams, or West teams, I guess I would say, as most of them are European, I suppose. But they just haven't been performing very well. They got shut down just yesterday, 4-0 against the Outlaws. They took one map away from London here. Is like, are we going to finally see a Dallas Fuel that can compete again? Is this just a format thing? Or are they just in a slump? What's going on here?
Well, clearly, when it comes to Envy, they have not been playing up to the sum of their parts throughout their transition to being the Fuel. And I think if you think back to their time when they were Envy, is that their excellence over time came from their stability. They were one of the longest lasting cores in Overwatch. And there's things that you take for granted when you have a core together that long, because now they're the Fuel. You've swapped up key parts, which means that you're changing internal communications. Not everything is as it was. And when you're making that transition, what happens is that you're going to have things like missed calls. You're not going to necessarily be tracking things as well. The coordination between your tanks and the DPS going in will be somewhat less. Your reactions to certain things might not be the same because you're expecting something where you would think that, say, Coco looks to the support role and goes, oh, I know how Harry Hook is going to respond to this, but instead it's a map where they're running Custa and Chips, and that's not anything against Chips, but it's just sort of, the NV core knew how everyone played, and now that they're Fuel, I think there's definitely some growing pains there for sure.
Something that we were kind of talking about back and forth in Discord was how kind of uncomfortable we're seeing these teams look with Mercy right now, and I think the Fuel would definitely be one of those teams that just, they don't seem to be the old envious with Mercy playing right now. I mean, do you think we're bound to see that change with these next round of changes?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I have had the pleasure of watching a lot of potential contenders teams scrim on PTR and where that's going. And Mercy is sort of back in her own box now, PTR, where she's being best friends with Farah, but not being run all the time. Obviously, that helps the MV core, where you have a player like Harry Hook. You no longer have to put him in uncomfortable roles like Zenyatta because you don't want to put him on Mercy. So that entire thing is going to help out quite a bit. Also, I mean, it's just going to change Overwatch in general when Mercy is set to PTR levels, because then you don't have situations like Seoul getting away with the one support combination with Mercy because Mercy's that powerful. I do think, though, in terms of changes, so we've kind of settled the Mercy thing, and what I wanted to touch on with Envy as well is that, so I think for Envy, I don't think Mickey has really gotten comfortable with the new D.Va, where D.Va, of course, in the past used to be the 4-second defensive matrix, the Iron Wall, and Mickey was very good at supporting his team and keeping key targets alive, especially when you'd run something like Taimu and a McCree. It's like, oh, Mickey's there, he's protecting everything, this is great. Mickey, I feel like in D.Va right now, there's two extremes, and while it'd be great to get both, D.Vas tend to fall in one category and the other. You have your mechanical gods like Cool Matt that do really well at getting pickoffs and making the most in Matrix where it's at now. And then you have your ultimate gods like Poco that just have great game sense at dropping game-changing ults. Mickey really hasn't been able to capture either aspect of D.Va in its current form. And my evidence to sort of go a step further and go, look, good off-tank play can do a world of difference for Envy. Is take a look at how Oasis went for them, where Taimu was in on off-tank as Hog. They weren't running a D.Va at all. And the contribution that Taimu was able to get on Hog in conjunction with the rest of the team made made Fuel look far more fearsome in that case. So I think for Fuel, definitely the core part was an issue. Certainly the meta with Mercy being so prevalent is an issue, but also I do think they have to look a little bit more deeply at the off-tank situation, because I don't think Mickey is playing to the level that he needs to right now, given where other off-tank play is in OWL currently.
So last question for you then, and then I'll let you go, is the London Spitfire. They've looked really good recently. They've played really well. Do you feel like we saw London Spitfire's A game today?
I mean, London Spitfire definitely look good. I think they're still figuring things out just with the fact that they have an enormous roster. But, as evidenced by the fact that, okay, we're going to swap in Rascal for a bit. We're going to change things up. The one thing that still continually impresses me about London Spitfire, though, is their tank play. The amount of times where Gesture would not only take control of a fight, but just lock people down, where you'd see an Envy soldier, like Taimu, just locked in a corner wishing for dear life. London Spitfire, and this kind of goes to what I've been saying about Overwatch for a while now, is that tanks and supports win games, and how they've been handling the tank and support side has been very good right now. I think they're one of the better coach teams in the league from the results we've been seeing. And have they hit their full potential? No, I don't think so. I think that when you have the roster that they have, as evidenced by just you look at Fuel and the issues they've had in mixing in their roster, it's going to take some time for, I think, London to figure out, all right, when do we actually want to play certain people? What do we expect out of that? But hey, they're in a good spot right now. They have a win buffer to work with. I'd expect Spitfire to continue to change things up as they go on, so long as they aren't under pressure, and I think the sky's the limit for them.
Awesome. Well, ZP, thank you so much for coming on yet again. I hope to have you on again soon.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure.
My thanks to ZP for stopping by on the show today. Make sure to follow him on Twitter at TempoZP. Tomorrow I'm going to be joined by Overwatch caster and analyst for the Australia region, Genome. We're going to go ahead and discuss the last day of matches for week 2 of the inaugural season of Overwatch League. Remember, you can find the show on all of your favorite podcast outlets, including iTunes, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Google Podcasts, and of course, you can find us on the front page of winstonslab.com. If you like the show and want to support it, don't hesitate to go over to patreon.com/OWL Daily Show and see how you can get involved. We're also on YouTube. Click on the link in the show notes to find us. If you want to stay in touch, email me at overwatchleaguedaily@gmail.com, tweet me at OWL Daily Show, or join our Discord at discord.me/OWL Daily Show. That's going to do it for this one. I'll be back tomorrow with Genome for another episode of Overwatch League Daily.